Hey there, I'm Mr. Terry. I'm a high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video. In keeping up with covering and trying to present to you a lot of contextual videos and information about the current Israel and Palestine conflict, I've got another popular one to show and, of course, comment on. So this is just called History of Israel-Palestine Conflict, and it's by a channel called History on Maps. I don't think I've ever covered them before, but I love using maps and history together. I'm a total map nerd, and geographic understanding is basically a must in understanding history, and thus understanding the present. So I have no idea what their style is going to be, if they're going to advocate for anything, or even what times they're covering. So you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert things when I see fit. All right, the original video is down below. Make sure you support that, and let's get started. All right, here we go. If this is a good channel, let me know. You know, obviously I'll be, hopefully I'll be able to tell this video, but
Israel, the world's only
history
Jewish
videos.
state located east of the Mediterranean Sea, and Palestine, the territory of the Arab population that hails from the Israel-controlled land, have long been known for their enduring conflict with the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip.
So this map right here already, you can tell, is showing current situations. So you got Gaza, and then you've got a very mixed kind of populace in the West Bank, which is part of the cited problems that they're having right now anyways, but we'll get to that maybe.
The tension between Israel and Palestine has been deteriorating in years, climaxing with many violent clashes between the two sides. To understand the root of the Israel-Palestine conflict, we have to look back a few thousand years ago.
Okay. We'll see what's going on here, because, you know, what you're going to get with the early ancient stuff is especially you're going to get, religious foundings, but you are going to get a history of these groups in ancient times. And kind of said in other videos, the direct actions happening right now, people aren't citing, these ancient conflicts, but of some much more in the last century. But it is important to understand deeper history, but you also got to understand which parts of history are being addressed right now with current events.
History of Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In the 17 centuries BC, following the call of God, three patriarchs of the Jewish people, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, settled in Canaan, a region approximating present-day Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip, parts of Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. The region later had the name the Land of Israel, the Promised Land, the Palestine region, or the Holy Land. In 1000 BC, King Saul established the Israelite monarchy, which then was ruled by King David, who made Jerusalem the capital of his kingdom, and his son King Solomon, who built the first temple in Jerusalem. After the death of King Solomon,
again, keep an eye on these dates. You're talking 3,000 years ago. So especially with some of these groups, they are going to feel like they have roots, this far back.
The United Monarchy was split into the Kingdom of Israel in the north, with Samaria as the capital, and the Kingdom of Judah in the south, with Jerusalem as the capital. The land became home to a majority of Jews, but then it was subject to numerous conquests of various groups, leading to the significant decrease of the Jewish population on the land. One of these conquests was conducted by the Roman Empire.
Okay. One missing from this one, or just, I get it, time. I'm not out to say, oh, you should have done this and that, because that's why, by the way, you have to look at lots of different sources from a lot of different time periods. But yeah, there's already, even before this, before the Romans show up, there have been push and pull factors for the ancient Jewish population. If you want to go back, you've got like Babylon. Okay, Babylon coming in, spreading in. You get the Babylonian captivity, so they basically get booted out of that land. And then when the Persians come back, when the Persians come, a lot of the Jews come back. You have issues with but yeah, those are the main two ones. But then you can have like Egypt or something like that, but not on the timeline necessarily of the Exodus necessarily, but like different timelines of that with the New Kingdom. But anyway, so there are a lot of different groups. And then with the Jewish revolt, which you'll see if he gets to, that really booted out a lot of people. And for a lot of it was really the last time, going back all the way to ancient Rome, where Israel as an autonomous functioning homeland basically won't exist anymore. And that's, again, over 2,000 years ago.
Who gave the name Palestine to Judah, intending to break the Jewish connection with the land of Israel. During this time, Christianity, which started as a Jewish sect, ultimately became a dominant religion toward the end of the Roman Empire. In the 7th century came an Arab conquest, beginning the spread of Islam. The Dome of the Rock was built on the ruin of the Second Temple, making Jerusalem the holy city to 3 monotheistic religions.
Dome of the Rock and that kind of stuff, and the site of the Temple Mount is disputed by a lot of archaeologists about the actual site. The actual site, the big kind of elevated kind of area, also is where the Romans built a large fort, a fort there. Some like archaeologists say it was actually a little bit to the, not at that exact site, but to the side a little bit of kind of the older Jerusalem too. So that site is kind of interesting because it's been interpreted to be an exact location by different groups, but it's also disagreed upon by different groups. Now, what you have with Jews too is, though, is, and on that site too, is the Wailing Wall, which say is part of a foundation of that. But there's also people, archaeologists that say that no, that wall specifically is actually from the old Roman fort, but is still, regardless, can be seen as symbolic as well. But there's a lot of different interpretations on it from different people.
Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. After Christians in Jerusalem were intensely persecuted by the Seljuk Turks, a Central Asian empire with ambition to expand its territory, Christians in Europe launched several crusades to bring the holy city back to the hand.
Now, up to this point, there had been pretty good freedom of movement for people coming into these religious sites, Jews, Christians, Muslims alike, coming into areas in and around Jerusalem. And then it became a lot more hostile during this time period with the Seljuk Turks, which is why you're going to get the Crusades, where you have that. But again, you're talking about similar sites that are holy to different ones. The Dome of the Rock, according to Islamic tradition, is the site where called the Midnight Ride for Muhammad had kind of ascended to or had made a travel and had visions and stuff like that. Not to get into the specifics of it, but that same site being very holy and building that there is in the proximity of whether the Wailing Wall is actually a part of the foundation of the old temple or nearby, is still going to be very close in proximity. Plus, in that exact area, you're going to have Christian sites where they say, Christ was crucified and all that. So there's your religious history.
Christians. During this time, many Jews were killed. Others were making pilgrimages everywhere, mostly in Western Europe. From the 16th century to World War I, the Holy Land, along with much of the Middle East, was ruled by the Ottoman Empire, an Islamic superpower. The land was unofficially called Palestine.
And Ottoman Empire had kind of rules in here about worship. You had things like the jizya tax, like other Islamic groups or caliphates and other groups had, where basically there was a tax put on non-Muslims, which was to suffice the need for like military service and stuff like that. But relatively, this area was, because of the Ottoman Empire's control there, was able to be managed and have fewer conflicts between those groups under Ottoman rule.
At the same time in Europe,
but also, again, the Jewish population still is very small at this time. I think in Jerusalem itself, I think it's about 3%. It's going to be a little bit higher in some other areas, but especially around Jerusalem.
More and more Jews were joining,
which is where the border for the West Bank is.
Movement called Zionism, aiming to create a Jewish national state in its ancient homeland.
Right.
Hence, in the first decade of the 20th...
And this is where, when you're talking about the land disputes that exist, are more directly tied is right here now in the 20th century. Balfour Declaration, which kind of paves a way that the British were going to start to pave a way for the creation of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. And you start to get the big migration, and then it gets even more in World War II. But yeah, the direct conflict ties a lot more to the land claims that are happening about at the start of this video. Because land claims anytime before this, you're talking about people that often don't have any kind of actual ancestry tied to land ownership at that time because of, well, you saw the history with Jews coming in and out of the region for centuries.
Tens of thousands of Jews moved from Europe back to the region. Israel and Palestine under the British rule.
Yep. So the British ruled, British, they called the mandate. The British ruled this region, which already set off a problem because that area there had been promised during World War I to both Arab leaders, to Jewish leaders, and even to like Palestinians that were already there and had been promised all around in circles, which starts us off at a bad position, starting with these different promises the British held. And yeah.
One exploded and ended with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Its land in the Middle East was carved by the British and French empires. The British then gave more independence for Iraq and Jordan, and the region remaining under the control of Britain was what it called the British Mandate for Palestine.
By the way, a lot of the borders you're drawn up for Jordan, Iraq, and all that were also very hastily drawn up as borders more to separate claims between the British and the French mandates than the actual local communities there.
Where Britain promised to establish a Jewish national homeland under its Balfour Declaration, which went into effect in 1923.
It's really short, by the way. That's the Balfour Declaration. It's like a letter. You can read it in like 30 seconds. Read it. It is quietly the most important probably thing that has led to the situations going on over the last century. Let me go back 5 seconds.
Under its Balfour Declaration, which went into effect in 1923. Tensions between the Jews and the Arabs who both claimed the land grew, which even led to acts of violence. By the 1930s, following the increasing Jewish population in Palestine due to the fear of persecution during the Nazi reign in Germany, the British limited Jewish immigration.
Which made Jews very upset with the British as well. So now they all hate the British.
In response, the Jewish militias formed to both fight the Arabs and resist the British rule. Then came the Holocaust throughout Nazi Germany, which claimed almost 6 million Jewish lives. After the war, more and more Jews then fled from Europe to Palestine to seek a homeland, escalating the tension with the Arabs.
And it's important to understand that now international sympathy for an Israel, creation of an Israel. There's no official Israel yet. This is still, there's still mandates and stuff in here, but sympathy is at an all-time high.
Overwhelmed by the situation, Britain began to withdraw from the region.
Yeah, that's why the British are like, all right, we out. We'll leave it to the UN. Which is what they're going to do. They're going to leave it to the UN. That's what the British did in India as well, with India and Pakistan. And what we find out with really the UN in this time period after World War II is their idea for any area, okay, that may not be easy necessarily to handle is just split it between the two different groups or something. And that has been very difficult. You see it, and you saw it in Korea as well. Pakistan, you have over 1 million people died during the partition of India and Pakistan. Something else very, very swept under the rug a lot when you talk about violence and in these potential like 2-state solutions and stuff like that. And that's the worst one.
After World War II, the UN proposed a plan to partition Palestine into two independent states, a Jewish state and an Arab state, with the city of Jerusalem becoming an international zone with a special status.
Yeah, Jerusalem, they were like, hey, Jerusalem's way too important for any one group to have, and it doesn't even matter if it's within an Arab state, an Arab Palestinian state, or like a Jewish state, you know, and because they're like, it's too important. But again, that become problematic too, and it does because it is.
However, the plan according to which the Jewish, accounting for only 1/3 of the population, was granted more territory, 56.5% of the land, was rejected by the Arabs. They began to form volunteer armies throughout Palestine.
Their grievances for that too go before this because it wasn't 1/3. You know, originally when Balfour and stuff, these declarations when the British happened, there had been another 30 years of immigration coming in. So it's like come to 1/3, right? At its highest here.
Less than 1 year after that, as Britain completed its withdrawal from Palestine, Israel declared itself an independent state, marking a new, bloodier chapter in the struggle between the Jews and the Palestinian Arabs.
And we get wars.
The 1948 Arab-Israeli War.
Of them.
Right after the announcement of an independent Israel, a war between the Arabs and the Jews broke out, which was known as the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. The war involved 5 recently independent Arab nations: Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, the Arab League, who invaded the region in an attempt to establish a unified Arab Palestine. However, a ceasefire agreement was reached a year later in which more than two-thirds of historic Palestine, including the West Jerusalem, belonged to Israel, while Jordan occupied East Jerusalem and the area known as the West Bank, and Egypt occupied the Gaza Strip. As a result, more than 750,000 Palestinians were expelled from the land where they lived for centuries on the day that they call Al-Nakba, or the catastrophe.
Probably something I need to cover more, the Nakba, as well as for myself too, and just to be a student of that. And you guys can come and learn along with me. So I'll probably be looking for some sources of that. I'll probably look at some of the, try to find some of the popular ones out there and kind of use that as a starting point to start to go deeper there. So, but again, yeah, you're seeing here, kind of, it didn't really talk about too is, Israel will basically win that war. And remember that the new Israel had a lot of support from the West militarily to be able to defeat this coalition. And they felt here that they very much they felt they were the victims of this. And then as a result of the success of the war, able to take lands, right? Because, saying, you won this war and you were the victim of it, lending justification for more of the lands that were actually not part of the UN plan, but also remember there was disagreement on the Arab side about these plans from the first place.
With the deteriorated dispute between the Jews and the Arabs, there came more wars and fighting in the following decades. The 60-Day War.
No, 6-Day War. It was 6 days.
It was in 1967 when the 60-Day War broke out after a volatile period of diplomatic friction and skirmishes between Israel and its neighboring Arab states, Jordan, Syria, and Egypt. This brief war ended with the victory of Israel, giving Israel control over the Golan Heights from Syria, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. Sinai was later returned to Egypt under the Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty. After the war, most Palestinian refugees and their descendants were not allowed to return to their homes, but had to live in Gaza, the West Bank, and neighboring Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon.
So you're getting a lot more concentration of the people there into those areas, especially for our purposes right now, West Bank and Gaza. And like they said, a lot of those homes that they vacated during the war were then taken and repopulated by Jewish settlers or people like that. So you're actually talking about a homeland now of people that are alive today, right? Trying to return to these homelands. But again, the justification on the Israel side has been like, hey, this has been a war that's, the Arab world like attacks, right? And it's like, this is part of the consequences of war and stuff like that. And also see it as a future defensive mechanism. So both sides have felt very justified in their current situation since the 60s of their standpoint of it being their land, either person's land.
The First Intifada and the Oslo Accords. The rising number of Israelis settling in the Palestinian territories in the West Bank and Gaza gave rise to the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, first founded in Cairo, Egypt in 1964 to create a liberated Palestine in Israel. The PLO launched attacks on Israel from its base in Jordan. It was then forced to move from Jordan to Lebanon, starting to carry out acts of terrorism against Israel. Fighting went on for years, including the Israeli invasion of Lebanon to kick the PLO out of Beirut. The PLO eventually agreed to divide the land between Palestine and Israel, but there were still more and more Jewish settlers moved into the Israel-occupied Palestinian territories.
Also important to understand that a lot of these people, the Jews moving in, were not from Israel. They were Americans, they were Europeans. They were not from that area.
In 1987, a violent Palestinian uprising was ignited, starting from the Jabalia refugee camp after an Israeli Defense Forces truck collided with two Palestinian civilian vans, killing 4 of them. This was known as the First Intifada. This bloody conflict, resulting in hundreds of deaths, triggered a peace process with the signing of the Oslo Accords by Israel and the PLO. The Oslo I Accord signed in Washington, D.C., and the Oslo II Accord in Taba, Egypt. According to the Oslo Accords, the West Bank was divided into 3 areas. Area A was exclusively controlled by the Palestinians. Area B was controlled by both the
Geographic mess,
Palestinians
huh?
and Israel. Area C was fully controlled by Israel. The second
So it's like help Palestinians in a way that they have some control, because really after the 6-Day War, they had zero control, but it still isn't even close to going back to original lines that they even never agreed with. You know what I mean? It was not close to the victory, of course, that the Palestinians would have wanted, but yeah.
Intifada.
All right, you have the second.
Though further peace talks continued in 2000, the Israelis and Palestinians could not reach agreements on issues like the status of Jerusalem, rights of refugees, and the increased Jewish settlement in Palestinian lands.
So yeah, they're going. Part of that too, the control of things like Wailing Wall, Al-Aqsa Mosque, those religious areas. Now remember, the original idea was going to be internationally controlled, or an internationally neutral area, and that did not happen anymore. That was gone. So basically, whoever was going to be in control could control the holy sites, and that has been ever, especially since this Second Intifada, very much in control of Israelis, who can very much control who comes and has access to these holy sites, which has been something of a lot of disagreement and just very disliked by the Palestinian community.
Ariel Sharon, a Jewish Israeli who would later become Israel's prime minister, visited the Temple Mount, home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. The action was deemed offensive by many Palestinians, and the Second Intifada broke out.
Again, the same site.
The violence ended with Israel's withdrawal from Gaza, but continued to settle in the West Bank.
That's one thing that never stopped with all this, was the continuing settlers, right, coming into these lands.
Israel conflict with Hamas.
Okay, Hamas is coming in.
Hamas is a Sunni Islamist militant group aiming to destroy the state of Israel and create an Islamic state.
One of the things interesting happening right now with Hamas, you're going to get this group, but actually how much diversity is actually within it. We'll see, and we check up at this. A report kind of came out. And by the way, I'd mentioned this in other videos. Man, you got to be careful with anything that comes out information-wise about what's going on here, because there's misinformation everywhere on all sides. But one of them, a report that I saw today, and we'll see if it could get confirmed or whatever, was that not all of Hamas knew about the current attack, the recent attack, that not all of them did that. That's a lot of the commanders didn't know. So I don't know if that means there's factioning inside of Hamas. I don't know. We'll see what reports come out, but that did come out. So don't confirm it, but it just shows us how, like, when we hear things, we also need to continue to go deeper and look for more signs of validation.
After the armed conflict between Hamas and Fatah, who managed the PLO, Hamas split from the Palestinian Authority and gained power in the Gaza.
You're gonna get that too.
Israel put Gaza under a suffocating blockade, leading to several bloody wars between the two groups in the Gaza Strip, including Operation Cast Lead, Operation Pillar of Defense, and Operation Protective Edge. In 2014, Hamas and Fatah reached agreement to form a national unity government. In 2018, the U.S. Embassy was relocated from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which
that saw a ton of protests there, right? The idea of Jerusalem trying to be like a politically more neutral city too, of moving the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv. That was an agreement made between President Trump, and then you had Benjamin Netanyahu, which gave, again, Palestinians did not like that, because it said it goes against the neutrality that Jerusalem is supposed to hold, where Tel Aviv is very clearly a Jewish or Israeli controlled city,
which was deemed.
But this saw a ton of protest and violence happening there. Some of the protests led to the killing of Palestinian protesters
by the Palestinians as a signal of American support for Jerusalem as Israel's capital. 2021.
Now, it's not like that event though really like solidified the U.S. support of Israel. That's happened from the get-go, so it didn't necessarily change. I don't think nobody was surprised that, like, oh, the U.S. is taking that side. Like, everyone already knew that, but
conflict between Israel
Still
and
very
Palestine was reassumed
a lot of
by a
people there.
series of hostile events in East Jerusalem, leading to several acts of violence until a ceasefire deal brokered by Egypt, Qatar, and the United Nations came into effect on May 21st. Peaceful though it may seem now, the complex and long-lasting territorial dispute between two states is a ticking time bomb that can explode any time.
This video is 2 years old. It was made after that. 2 years old. Now, this is not a very brave necessarily or like hot take to hypothesize that there's going to be an issue, but you can see, hopefully you're understanding with all these videos, the context. Like, this is actually not a surprise.
Thanks for watching. If you find this information useful, please give us a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos of history.
All right, final thoughts. All right, another video down of looking at famous videos that have been talking about this context. And again, all of them except for the last one I did, it was by Caspian Report. That was the last one I covered. Other than that, the videos were before this conflict. So the one I saw from Vox, from Crash Course, and this one. But it's interesting how they all kind of had similar conclusions where they're like, this is not a settled issue, like at all. And so now where I think hopefully you've been able to, if you've been following me, getting all this context together and see the big situation happening here. So anyway, good to see the video from the geographic perspective with the maps and all that stuff. I like that. I love the visual learning from those sorts of things. So all right, but it was good to again see another perspective there. So I'll look to cover some more things. I've been getting a lot of suggestions coming through in the Discord server. All right. One thing I will say about the Discord server, come on in and definitely post links, and not just to this stuff, for everything. But the Discord server also is not a place though where we talk about the current events going on. We don't really do that. We focus on history, deeper history. So if you're looking to come in and have a discussion again of like the current conflict and specific events, not going to be the place for that. But we'd love to have you around to come in and talk about the history of lots of different subjects. But yeah, come on over with that. All right. Anyways, we'll see y'all next time.